The forest was alive with whispers. The wind danced through the tall, ancient trees, carrying secrets that had been buried for centuries. Moss clung to the gnarled branches and shadows shifted in ways that made even the bravest traveler uneasy. Among these shadows, a small, weathered shack sat hidden, almost swallowed by the forest itself. Its walls were cracked, its roof sagging, but it was a place of quiet safety, a sanctuary for someone the world had rejected. Lyra pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders as she stepped out of the shack. Rain had begun to fall, cold and steady, soaking the earth beneath her feet. She paused for a moment, listening. Every drop of water on the leaves sounded like a whispered warning. But she was used to caution. She had been cautious all her life. Once she had lived in a grand house in the heart of the kingdom. Once she had known warmth and laughter, but all of that had been stripped away. The family she had loved, the people she had trusted, they had cast her out, calling her cursed, dangerous, unworthy. No one could say exactly why, but the rumors had spread quickly. By the time she reached the forest, the word Omega had become a brand, and her name carried the weight of shame. She shivered and stepped back into the shack. The fire she had kept alive flickered weakly in the hearth, struggling against the damp air. She knelt by it, blowing gently until the flames roared to life, sending shadows dancing across the walls. The shack smelled of wet wood and herbs, of earth and old paper. It was a strange comfort. Here at least she was alone yet never truly quiet. The forest had a way of speaking to her. At night she often heard soft rustlings, creatures moving unseen, leaves brushing against one another. Sometimes it felt as if the forest itself was watching her, protecting her, and maybe it was. Maybe that was why she had chosen this place among the towering trees and hidden streams. Lyra sat by the fire, her knees drawn close. In her hands she held a small book, its pages filled with sketches and notes of herbs, roots, and strange symbols she did not fully understand. She had spent days collecting what little knowledge she could from the forest, trying to piece together some sense of safety. The book was her companion, her anchor, and in the quiet hours it gave her a sense of purpose. But purpose was not enough to chase away fear. As the night deepened, the wind grew louder. Rain pelted the roof in hard, steady rhythms. Lyra was about to close her eyes when she heard it, a snap of a branch outside, sharp and deliberate. Her heart leapt into her throat. She froze, straining her ears. Another step, then another. Someone or something was coming toward the shack. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. Who would come to this place? Who would find her in the middle of this forest, far from any town or village? The forest had kept her safe for weeks, but she knew that safety could vanish in an instant. The door creaked. Lyra held her breath. Lyra! A voice called, deep and steady, carrying over the sound of the storm. Her blood froze. That voice, calm, commanding, yet familiar in a way she could not place, it made her heart pound like a drum. How did he know her name? Why would anyone speak it here in the middle of nowhere? Lyra pressed herself against the far wall, her mind spinning. Should she hide? Should she run? Her hands trembled and her throat felt tight. But the voice came again, louder this time, as if searching for her among the shadows. Lyra, come to the door. Something in the tone made her stomach twist. There was authority, but also a strange gentleness. She could not explain it. It stirred something long buried. Fear, yes, but also curiosity. Slowly, she inched toward the door, her fingers brushing the wood. Her pulse raced as she opened it a crack, just enough to peek through. And then she saw him. The man standing in the rain was tall, broader than any warrior she had ever seen in the city. His armor, dark and gleaming even under the storm, bore the marks of countless battles. His hair, black as midnight, clung to his face, framing sharp, commanding features. But it was his eyes, pale, piercing, yet filled with something unspoken that made her heart stutter. They were the eyes of someone used to command, to authority, someone who could make the entire kingdom tremble with a word. The Alpha King. Lyra had heard stories of him, as everyone in the kingdom had. Kalen, the Alpha King, ruler of the lands, feared and respected in equal measure, powerful, enigmatic, and unapproachable. And now he was here, standing before her, calling her name as if he had been searching for her for a long time. Why? Why are you here? Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Kalen's gaze softened just slightly, but it was enough for her to see something unexpected. Recognition, perhaps even concern. I need your help, he said. There are things you do not understand. threats that reach beyond the walls of your old city. I am not here to harm you, Lyra. I am here to protect you. Lyra's mind spun. Protect her from what? She wanted to recoil, to slam the door and retreat into her sanctuary. But a strange pull rooted her to the spot, making her listen. You don't even know me, she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. I know more than you think, Kalen replied. His voice was steady, unyielding, yet it carried a strange warmth. The world has turned against you, but I see who you are. The truth of your strength. The courage you have hidden even from yourself. Lyra's hand shook. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this. Nobody had ever seen past her exile, past the rumors and whispers. And yet she could not help but feel a flicker of something dangerous and unfamiliar. Hope. The storm grew stronger, rain lashing against the door and windows. Kalen's gaze did not waver. You are not alone, Lyra. The curse that haunts your bloodline. It is real, and only you can face it. But you cannot do so alone. Her breath caught in her throat. Curse? Bloodline? She had been rejected, yes, but she had never understood why. The forest had been her refuge, her escape. Now everything she had tried to hide from the world, the rumors, her own doubts, was coming to the surface. Lyra's heart ached with fear, yet there was a strange excitement beneath it, like the first spark of fire in the cold night. She wanted to run, yes, but a part of her wanted to know more. She wanted to understand why Kalen had come, why he sought her in this hidden corner of the world, and why, despite everything, she could not look away from him. The Alpha King took a cautious step forward, rain dripping from his armor, water pooling at his boots. Lyra, the forest is not safe forever. The curse will not wait, and neither will those who would use it for their own gain. You must trust me. Lyra swallowed hard, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? And yet, the storm outside seemed to echo his words, and the trees, ancient and wise, seemed to lean closer, as if urging her to listen, to believe. With a trembling hand, she opened the door wider, enough to let him enter. Kalen stepped inside, his presence filling the small shack, warm despite the rain. He did not touch her, did not speak, but simply stood there surveying the small space she had claimed as her own. His eyes softened as they met hers again, and for the first time in weeks, Lyra felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. And then the wind howled through the cracks in the shack, carrying with it a strange, chilling whisper. Lyra froze. Kalen's gaze hardened, sharp as a blade. Something was moving in the forest, something old, dangerous, and aware of their presence. Lyra's pulse raced. She wanted to retreat, to hide, to pretend she had never opened the door. But Kalen reached a hand toward her, his voice calm and certain. Do not be afraid. Whatever comes, we face it together. Her hand hovered near his, trembling. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to pause, the shadows stilling, and then a deafening crack split the air, a branch snapping under weight far heavier than any animal, followed by a sound that chilled her to the bone. A deep growl, echoing through the forest. Lyra's eyes widened, and she realized with a start that she was not just being watched. She was being hunted. Kalen's hand gripped her arm, firm and protective. Stay close, he said. The forest will test you tonight, Lyra, but you will not face it alone. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt that being seen, being chosen, could be as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Outside, the shadows shifted. Inside, two hearts beat fast, one full of fear, the other of command, yet both bound by a growing, unspoken connection. And somewhere in the forest, the darkness waited, patient, ancient, and hungry. Cliffhanger. Lyra faces a storm and a mysterious predator in the forest, standing with the Alpha King at her side. Will she survive the night? And what truths will the forest reveal about the curse tied to her bloodline? The forest had grown silent after the first stormy onslaught, but it was an uneasy silence, heavy with anticipation. Lyra's heart still raced from the encounter the night before. She could hardly believe that the Alpha King himself had come to her shack, drenched in rain and commanding as if he owned not just the forest, but the very air around him. Yet here he was inside her small sanctuary, and she could no longer pretend the world outside her walls had nothing to do with her. Kalen moved with careful precision, examining the shack as if it were more than just a temporary shelter. His armor bore scratches from travel and combat, though the rain had softened their sharp edges. His eyes, pale and piercing, flicked to Lyra constantly, measuring, judging, yet also searching. She could not tell what he sought, information, truth, or something far more personal. I need to know everything, Kalen said finally, his voice low but firm. Not just about the forest, but about you, Lyra. About why the kingdom turned against you. Lyra's hands tightened around the edges of the small table she had made from fallen branches. I told you nothing. I am nothing now. Just an exile. Nothing? Kalen's voice was incredulous, yet not unkind. Do you hear yourself? Do you think the forest chose you at random? That the creatures that watch these woods, spirits older than my crown, allow just anyone to survive here? No, Lyra. You have strength they recognize, power they can sense, even if you cannot. Lyra laughed, a short, bitter sound. Power? My power is survival, and even that is fragile. I have nothing else. Kalen stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth emanating from him despite the cold air. Survival is the first sign of power, he said. But it is not the end. The end comes when you claim who you are, not who the world says you should be. Lyra felt her pulse quicken. His words were sharp, deliberate, yet they carried a strange comfort. She had lived in the shadows for so long that light, true recognition, felt almost dangerous. And yet she could not turn away from him. A sudden rustle outside the shack made them both tense. Kalen's hand went instinctively to the hilt of his sword, though he did not draw it. They are near, he said, his eyes narrowing. The forest tells me they are moving closer. Shadows that do not belong here. Lyra swallowed, her stomach twisting. She had heard the whispers of the forest creatures for weeks, but this felt different. Heavy, purposeful, malevolent. The kind of threat that did not simply pass by. Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. You will not face them alone, come. They moved out of the shack into the early morning mist. Rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the forest wet and heavy with scent. Mud clung to their boots, and the branches seemed to arch over them, as if watching their passage. Lyra noticed how Kalen moved, not with the awkwardness of a man traveling in the forest, but with an ease that suggested familiarity. He was a hunter, yes, but also a protector. They said you would not last long here, Kalen said quietly as they walked. But you have. Why, Lyra? Why do you endure this exile? Lyra hesitated. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I have no choice. Because if I stop, everything that's left of me disappears. If I hide, they win, and because maybe I am afraid to face the world again. Kalen's expression softened. Fear is not weakness, he said. It is proof you are alive. Proof that you feel, and proof that you are capable of more than even you imagine. They reached a clearing, sunlight breaking faintly through the mist. Lyra paused, noticing something she had never seen before. Small flowers, luminescent even in the half-light, bending toward her as if welcoming her presence. She blinked. The forest, it recognizes me? Kalen nodded. It recognizes the truth. You are not just anyone cast aside. You are the key to a prophecy that has lingered for generations. A curse has shadowed my line for centuries, Lyra, and only you can stop it. Lyra's breath caught. A curse, a prophecy? These were words she had only read about in the old tomes she carried in the shack. They were legends, stories meant to frighten children. Yet here was Kalen speaking with authority that left no room for disbelief. You think I can do this? She asked, fear and disbelief battling for dominance in her chest. I do not think, Kalen said firmly. I know. You have endured more than anyone I have ever seen. You have faced rejection, exile, and solitude. You have survived what most could not. That is why you can confront what lies ahead. Lyra wanted to protest. She wanted to run. She wanted to deny that she could be anything more than an exile. But the forest itself seemed to lean closer, the wind stirring the leaves in patterns almost deliberate. Even the shadows seemed to shift, revealing paths that had been hidden before. And then they came. From the edges of the clearing, figures emerged, dark, shadowy shapes, their movements swift and unnatural. Eyes glowed faintly in the mist, watching, waiting. Lyra's heart thumped violently against her ribs. She took an instinctive step back. Kalen moved in front of her, sword drawn. Do not fear them, he said, his voice calm and commanding. Do not show weakness. They feed on fear. Hold your ground. The shadows advanced. Lyra felt a surge of panic, but Kalen's presence steadied her. He was unwavering, an unmovable force against the creeping darkness. She realized, with a strange clarity, that she had never seen anyone like him before. Not in the court, not in stories, not in the history of the kingdom. He was not just a king, he was a protector, a force of nature himself. Lyra took a deep breath, gripping her own hands tightly. She did not have a weapon, did not have armor, but she had something else. The courage that had carried her through weeks of exile. She felt it rise inside her, a quiet fire that had been buried beneath fear and shame. As the shadow creatures lunged forward, Kalen moved with precision, his sword flashing in the mist. He did not strike recklessly, but with measured force, pushing them back while keeping Lyra safe. She watched him, awed, and something inside her stirred, an emotion that was both fear and admiration, longing and respect. One of the shadows broke through, faster than the others, aiming directly for Lyra. Instinctively, she raised her hands and the forest responded. Vines thick and strong shot from the ground, wrapping around the creature and holding it in place. Lyra stared in disbelief. She had not intended to do that. She had only moved, only breathed, and yet the forest had answered her. Kalen glanced at her, eyes wide with surprise and something deeper, approval, perhaps even awe. "You have the gift," he said quietly. "More than I imagined." Lyra's heart pounded. She did not feel powerful. She felt terrified, exhilarated, and exposed all at once. The shadows recoiled, their forms dissipating into the mist as if unwilling to confront the strange force that had arisen from the earth itself. When the last shadow vanished, Kalen sheathed his sword and turned to her. "Do you see now?" he asked. "Do you understand why you cannot remain hidden? The world, the forest, the very air itself, they have marked you for something greater. And I need you with me." Lyra felt her knees weaken. She wanted to speak, to deny everything, but no words came. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear, awe, and something dangerously close to hope. Kalen's gaze held her, steady and commanding. And she realized that he was not just asking her to fight the curse. He was asking her to trust him. The forest seemed to settle around them, the mist curling like a protective cloak. The storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and alive. Lyra knew that the world she had tried to hide from, the kingdom, the prophecy, the curse, was no longer something she could escape. Kalen was the key, the first step, the force that would lead her into a destiny she had never imagined. And yet, the shadows in the forest were only the beginning. The true danger, the true test of her courage, had yet to come. Kalen took her hand, firm but gentle, and said her name again, not as a command, but as a promise. "Lyra, together we face what comes next. Are you ready?" Lyra swallowed hard, her pulse racing. The night had tested her. The forest had tested her. And now, standing beside the Alpha King, she understood that her life, her exile, her very existence, had led her to this moment. She nodded. A single wordless gesture that carried all her fear, courage, and reluctant trust, and somewhere in the shadows of the forest, eyes glimmered, watching. The curse had stirred. The prophecy had begun. Cliffhanger. The forest stirs with unseen forces and the shadows retreat only for now. Lyra has awakened her latent connection to the forest, but the curse tied to her bloodline begins to manifest in ways neither she nor Kalen fully understand. Their journey together has begun, but the first trial is yet to come. The forest had grown quieter now, though the mist still clung to the trees like a living curtain. Lyra walked beside Kalen, her steps cautious on the muddy path, her heart still racing from the encounter with the shadows. She could feel the pull of the forest around her, alive with energy that whispered in a language she almost understood, and beside her Kalen moved with calm confidence, his presence both grounding and overwhelming. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked quietly, his gaze scanning the misted woods. "The way the forest shifts when you move, the way it listens." Lyra nodded, her fingers brushing against the damp leaves. "I think it wants to protect me, or at least warn me." Kalen's eyes softened as he looked at her. "More than that, it recognizes your power, Lyra. You are not simply surviving, you are awakening." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. Awakening. The word sounded like destiny, and yet it carried weight she did not feel ready to bear. "I'm not ready," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I barely understand myself, and now you speak of curses and prophecies as if they were truths I must accept." Kalen stopped and turned to her, his gaze steady. "Readiness is not a matter of choice. It comes when the world demands it, and the world has already demanded it from you. Lyra clenched her hands at her sides. The weight of exile had been heavy, but the weight of this moment, standing beside a king who could command armies and bend the will of the court, was heavier still. Yet beneath the fear there was a spark that had begun the night he had called her name in the rain. The forest opened into a wide glade, bathed in faint golden light. The air was warmer here, though the mist still swirled in soft spirals. Lyra paused to take in the scene. Ancient stones, carved with symbols she did not recognize, lay scattered in a circle at the center. The ground was soft with moss, and in the middle a faint pulse of energy shimmered, almost like a heartbeat. "This is a sacred place," Kalen said, his voice hushed. "It is where the prophecy was first written centuries ago, where the blood of the cursed line can either be broken or claimed. We must be careful here." Lyra's gaze fell on the stones, and a strange feeling stirred within her. Her pulse quickened, her senses tingling. She could feel the magic in the air, subtle and powerful, alive and aware. She did not understand it, could not name it, yet it called to her as if it had been waiting her whole life. Kalen placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, and the contact sent a shiver down her spine. "Lyra," he said softly, "you are stronger than you realize. This is why I have come. This is why I chose to find you even here in exile. The prophecy cannot be fulfilled without you, and I cannot face it alone." Lyra's heart fluttered, caught between fear and something far more dangerous, desire. She had never imagined she would feel anything like this for a king, especially one who seemed untouchable, distant, and powerful beyond measure. Yet here he was, standing beside her, his hands steady, his eyes locked on hers. I don't know if I can do it," she whispered. "What if I fail?" Kalen's grip tightened slightly, a gesture both protective and commanding. "Then I will fail with you, but I will not let you face this alone. You are not weak, Lyra. You are the only one who can break what was done to my line, and I will stand with you until the end." Lyra felt tears prick at her eyes, though she did not move to wipe them. The warmth in his words, the certainty in his gaze. It was as if a lifeline had been thrown to her from a world she had thought abandoned her forever. They stepped into the circle of stones, and the air shimmered around them. Kalen moved with precision, tracing lines along the edges of the carvings, muttering words in a language Lyra did not know. The forest seemed to lean closer, the mist curling around their feet as if guiding them. "Do you feel it?" Kalen asked, his voice lower now, almost reverent. "The pulse beneath your feet? That is the curse waiting to awaken. It will test us, Lyra, in ways we cannot yet see." Lyra's stomach twisted with fear, but a small, determined flame flickered within her. "Then we face it," she said firmly, more to herself than to him. "Together." Kalen's eyes softened as he looked at her, and for a moment she could see the man behind the king, the man who bore the weight of prophecy, of curse, and of power. "Together," he repeated. They began to work through the ritual the forest seemed to demand. Lyra followed Kalen's lead, tracing the carvings with her fingers, speaking the words he taught her. She could feel the energy thrumming beneath her palms, rising from the stones into her body. It was strange, intoxicating and terrifying all at once. As the magic began to stir, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees with a whispering force. Shadows lengthened, dark shapes moving at the edges of their vision. The forest was alive, aware, and testing them. Lyra's hand shook as she traced the final symbol, and Kalen's hand moved to steady hers. Their fingers brushed, lingering slightly longer than necessary. Her heart leapt. There was something in that simple touch, a connection that went beyond prophecy or duty, something primal and magnetic. Kalen's gaze met hers, intense and unwavering. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. I trust you." At that moment, a figure emerged from the mist, a shadow larger and darker than the rest, eyes glowing with a cold, malevolent light. Lyra's breath caught. The forest seemed to react instantly, the mist thickening, roots rising from the earth like protective barriers. Kalen drew his sword, the metal gleaming even in the dim light. "Stand behind me," he commanded. "Do not let fear control you." Lyra obeyed, though her hands trembled. She could feel the energy thrumming beneath her palms, responding to the threat, responding to her presence. The shadow lunged faster than she expected, and Kalen met it with a swing of his blade. Sparks of energy flared as steel met darkness, the clash echoing through the glade. For a moment, Lyra felt paralyzed. Then instinctively she raised her hands. The energy of the forest surged through her, a wave of power she had never controlled before. Roots shot up, wrapping around the shadow, holding it fast. The creature hissed and recoiled, unable to break free. Kalen's eyes widened, and he glanced at her with a mixture of awe and something more. Pride, admiration, and a hint of affection. "You are more powerful than I imagined," he said, voice low. More than the prophecy even predicted. Lyra's chest heaved with adrenaline. She had never felt such strength, such clarity. The forest had answered her call, and Kalen had believed in her enough to let her step into it. She felt a strange exhilaration, and something deep within her stirred, something that had been dormant through years of rejection and fear. When the shadow finally dissolved into mist, the forest fell silent again, though the pulse beneath their feet continued, stronger now, almost like a heartbeat. Kalen sheathed his sword and turned to Lyra, his expression softening. "You see," he said gently, "you are not merely an exile. You are the key, and I am honored to stand by your side." Lyra's gaze met his, and in that moment, the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. She felt an unspoken bond forming, a connection forged not just in magic but in trust, in shared fear, in the quiet understanding of two souls facing a destiny far larger than themselves. The forest seemed to acknowledge it too. The mist swirled gently around them, the sunlight filtering through in soft beams. The shadows had retreated for now, but Lyra knew this was only the beginning. The curse was stirring, the prophecy was awakening, and the bond between her and Kalen would be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to hope. Not just for survival, not just for freedom, but for something far more elusive: acceptance, recognition, and perhaps even love. Kalen's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment the world outside the glade disappeared. There was only the two of them, standing in the pulse of ancient magic, facing a future neither could fully see but both were bound to shape. And in the distance, a new shadow moved silently, unseen, watching, waiting. The curse had noticed her awakening. Cliffhanger. Lyra has awakened her latent magical connection with the forest, and the bond between her and Kalen deepens, fraught with tension and unspoken desire. But a new unseen shadow begins to move, signaling that greater danger lies ahead, and that the prophecy is far from complete. The forest had grown darker, the sunlight barely piercing the dense canopy overhead. Mist curled around the ancient trees, thick and heavy, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. Lyra's heart pounded with every step as she followed Kalen deeper into the woods. She could feel the forest watching, its pulse resonating with her own, as if the very air anticipated the trial that awaited them. Kalen moved with unshakable confidence, his armor glinting faintly in the dim light. He carried his sword, though he did not need to fight. His presence alone radiated power. Lyra could not help but be aware of him beside her, of the strength that seemed to bend the forest itself, and of the strange, unspoken tension that had begun to bind them together. "You must remember," Kalen said quietly, his voice cutting through the mist. "The curse is not just a test of strength. It tests your mind, your heart, your very spirit. Fear, doubt, anger, all of it will be used against you. You must be steady, Lyra. You must trust yourself and trust me." Lyra swallowed, her throat tight. She had never been confident in herself, had never known trust beyond the forest's quiet embrace. Yet here she was, being asked to face something ancient and dark, something that had haunted Kalen's line for centuries. I will try," she whispered. Kalen's eyes softened, but his gaze did not waver. "Try is not enough. You must endure." They reached a clearing where the trees formed a natural circle. The ground was uneven, covered in moss and roots that seemed to twist unnaturally. At the center lay a pool of black water, still and dark as obsidian. The air shimmered above it and the mist thickened, carrying with it the faint, haunting whispers of unseen voices. "The trial begins here," Kalen said, his voice low. "This pool reflects your fears, your regrets, and your deepest truths. You must face what emerges. Only then can the curse be challenged, and only then can the prophecy continue." Lyra took a hesitant step forward, her fingers trembling as she brushed the surface of the water. It was colder than she expected, and as her reflection shimmered, the image began to shift. She saw herself not as she was, but as the world had labeled her: rejected, cursed, weak. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind. You are nothing. You are powerless. You do not belong. She recoiled, but Kalen's hand on her shoulder steadied her. Face it, he said firmly. Do not turn away. You are stronger than the shadows that speak lies. Lyra's chest heaved, her fear pressing down like a weight. Slowly, she forced herself to look into the water again. The reflection shifted once more, showing her not as an exile, but as herself. Strong, resilient, capable. She saw the courage that had kept her alive in the forest, the quiet strength that had allowed her to survive, and the power she had begun to awaken. A shadow emerged from the water, dark and shifting, eyes glowing like embers. It took the form of a tall figure, its presence radiating malevolence. Lyra felt the forest's pulse quicken, as if warning her of the danger. Her first instinct was to flee, to hide, but Kalen's voice cut through her panic. Stand your ground, he commanded. You can do this. Lyra squared her shoulders. She raised her hands, feeling the energy of the forest thrumming through her. The shadow lunged, moving faster than her eyes could follow. But this time she did not falter. The energy responded to her intent, wrapping around the shadow like vines, holding it at bay. Kalen's gaze met hers, and in that moment, something passed between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust, of bond, of something deeper. He did not move to fight for her. He did not need to. She was beginning to understand that strength came not only from him, but from within herself. The shadow hissed and twisted, striking at her with claws of darkness. Lyra felt a surge of panic, but she focused, grounding herself in the forest's rhythm, in the pulse beneath her feet. She extended her hands, and roots thick and strong rose from the earth to bind the shadow. It writhed and screeched, but could not escape. Kalen stepped closer, his hand brushing hers as he guided the energy, amplifying her power. The contact sent a shiver through her, electric and unexpected, and for a moment, she felt something entirely new: connection, intimacy, the unspoken desire that had grown between them. You are ready, Kalen whispered, his breath close to her ear. Do not let fear claim you. Lyra nodded, focusing all her will. The shadow howled, and the mist twisted violently around them. Her reflection in the water shimmered once more, showing her true self, not the lies the world had fed her. She felt the curse pushing against her, probing her doubts, her pain, her fear. But she did not falter. She met the shadow with the energy of the forest, of Kalen, and of herself. With a final surge, the shadow dissolved into the mist, leaving the pool calm once more. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist thinning, sunlight breaking faintly through the canopy. Kalen knelt beside her, his hand on her back, steadying her. You did it, he said softly. You faced it. You endured. The curse recognizes your strength now, and it fears you. Lyra looked up at him, her chest heaving. I did not do it alone, she whispered. You never will, Kalen replied, his voice low, almost a rumble. Not as long as I am here. For a moment, the world fell away. Lyra saw him not as a king, not as a legend, but as a man who had chosen to stand with her, who had believed in her when the world had not. Her heart ached with longing, with gratitude, with something she could not yet name. Kalen's hand lingered near hers, brushing lightly. Lyra, he said softly, you are more than exile, more than Omega, more than the world has tried to make you. You are the future, and I will stand with you through it all. Lyra's breath caught. She wanted to speak, to confess the storm of emotions that had built inside her since the night he had found her in the shack, but words failed her. Instead, she nodded, a single gesture that carried all her fear, hope, and budding trust. The forest shifted around them, ancient and patient. The shadows had retreated for now, but Lyra knew the trial was not over. The curse had been tested, yes, but it was far from defeated. And Kalen. Kalen was no longer just her protector. He was her anchor, her guide, and something more that neither of them could fully name yet. Suddenly, a new sound broke the fragile peace. A whisper, carried on the wind, faint but deliberate. Lyra stiffened. Kalen's gaze sharpened, eyes scanning the trees. It begins again, he said grimly. The next trial approaches. We must move before it reaches us here. Lyra rose, brushing mud from her knees, her pulse quickening. Fear mingled with exhilaration, and something deeper stirred in her chest. a mix of longing and determination that was dangerous in its intensity. She had survived the first trial, but the forest had more tests in store and the curse was far from finished. Kalen extended his hand, and Lyra took it without hesitation. The warmth of his grip steadied her, and in that simple touch she felt a bond that no shadow, no curse could break. Together they moved deeper into the forest, toward the heart of the prophecy, toward trials that would challenge not only their strength but the fragile, unspoken connection growing between them. As they walked, the mist thickened again, carrying with it whispers of the unseen, creatures, spirits, perhaps the curse itself, watching and waiting. Lyra's heart pounded, not just with fear but with anticipation. She was no longer the rejected Omega hiding in a forest shack. She was a force awakening, a key to an ancient prophecy, and standing beside her was a king who saw her not as exile, but as equal, as partner, as something vital to the fate of their world. And somewhere in the shadows, unseen, a presence stirred, ancient, patient, and hungry. The forest had tested her courage. The first shadow had fallen, but the next trial was already coming, and it would not be merciful. Lyra tightened her grip on Kalen's hand. Together they would face whatever darkness lay ahead. Together they would confront the curse. Together they would awaken what the world had denied her for so long. But in the deepest shadows of the forest, eyes glimmered, waiting, as if the true challenge had only just begun. Cliffhanger. Lyra has passed the first trial, awakening her latent power and deepening her bond with Kalen, yet a new unseen force watches from the shadows, signaling that the next, more dangerous trial is imminent, and that the curse will push them to their limits, testing not only strength but trust and the unspoken bond growing between them. The forest was alive in a way Lyra had never felt before. The mist swirled around the trees, carrying whispers of long-forgotten magic. The shadows she had faced before were nothing compared to the presence that now moved in the deepest reaches of the woods. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting for what was to come. Lyra walked beside Kalen, her hand firmly gripping his. She felt a pulse of energy thrumming beneath her feet, stronger than before, connected to her in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Every step she took toward the heart of the forest was a step closer to the prophecy, closer to the ultimate trial that would determine her fate, and the fate of the kingdom Kalen ruled. "Are you ready?" Kalen asked, his voice steady but carrying the weight of centuries of duty. His eyes held her gaze, unyielding yet gentle, commanding yet tender. Lyra swallowed, her pulse quickening. I think I am. I must be, there's no other choice." Kalen's hand squeezed hers. "Then let us face it together." They entered a wide clearing where the air shimmered with ancient magic. In the center was a pedestal of black stone, etched with runes that glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wind seemed to pause, the trees leaning closer, as if the forest itself recognized the significance of this place. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation, and the whispers of the forest seemed louder now, urging her forward, warning her, testing her resolve. "This is it," Kalen said softly, "the heart of the prophecy. Whatever awaits you here will test everything, your courage, your strength, your will. But I believe in you, Lyra, and I will not leave your side." Lyra nodded, drawing a deep breath. The black stone pedestal began to glow brighter, and shadows coalesced around it, rising from the earth like living darkness. Lyra's instinct screamed at her to flee, but she did not. She felt the energy of the forest, of Kalen, of herself, coursing through her. This was her moment. She had been prepared for it, even if she did not yet realize it. The shadows took form, twisting and shifting into a figure both beautiful and terrifying. It was a being of darkness, its eyes glowing with an ancient, malevolent light. Yet it held a strange grace, a regal presence. It spoke, its voice echoing in Lyra's mind. "So the rejected one dares to step forward. Do you think you can break the curse that has bound this line for centuries?" Lyra's hands shook, but she lifted them, letting the energy she had learned to wield flow through her. "I do not know if I can," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I will try. I have no other choice." Kalen stepped beside her, his hand brushing hers, grounding her. "You are not alone. We face this together." The shadow surged forward, its form rippling with power, and the forest responded. Vines and roots shot from the ground, wrapping around the dark figure, restraining it. Lyra felt the pulse of energy intensify beneath her feet. answering her fear with strength. She focused, letting the power flow through her, shaping it with intent, with courage, with determination. Kalen drew his sword, its blade glinting with sunlight that barely pierced the mist. He moved with precise grace, defending Lyra, striking at the shadow whenever it broke free. But he did not fight for her, he fought beside her, a partner, an equal. Lyra's fear roared inside her, threatening to overwhelm her, but she drew on every lesson she had learned. The endurance of exile, the trust she had placed in Kalen, the bond she felt with the forest. The shadow screamed and twisted, but Lyra's power held firm, shaping the darkness, bending it to the light she had discovered within herself. "You are stronger than the world believed," Kalen said, his voice low and steady, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "Stronger than even I imagined. Do not let it break you." Lyra's heart pounded. She felt the shadow pressing against her mind, probing her fears, dredging up every doubt and regret she had ever carried. But she met it with clarity, with will, with truth. She saw herself not as the rejected Omega, not as the exile, but as Lyra, the survivor, the warrior, the force the forest had recognized long ago. With a final surge of strength, Lyra channeled all her energy into the shadow. It writhed, screamed, and then shattered into mist, dissolving into the forest. The air stilled, and a silence fell that was almost sacred. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted but exhilarated, feeling the forest settle around her like a protective embrace. Kalen knelt beside her, his hand warm on her back. "You did it," he whispered. "You broke the first chain of the curse. The prophecy begins with you, and you have succeeded." Lyra looked up at him, her chest heaving. I could not have done it without you," she admitted. "You never will," Kalen said gently. "Not as long as we are together." For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The forest pulsed softly beneath their feet, the mist curling in gentle spirals. The bond between them, forged in trials and trust, had deepened into something neither could deny. Lyra's heart beat with a mix of fear, relief, and a growing tenderness she could no longer ignore. Kalen's gaze held hers, unwavering and intense. "Lyra," he said softly, "you are more than exile, more than Omega, more than the world has ever allowed you to be. You are my equal, my partner, and something I cannot yet name, but something I feel as surely as the forest feels your presence." Lyra's breath caught. She had wanted connection, companionship, recognition, and now it was offered not as a gift, but as a truth that neither could ignore. She felt a warmth spreading through her, a courage that came not from the forest alone, but from the man who had chosen to stand beside her, in strength and in vulnerability. I feel it too," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I have always been afraid of being alone, but with you I feel more, stronger, not just safe but alive." Kalen's hand lifted to hers, fingers entwining. "Then we face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, whatever trials, whatever shadows, we face it as one. You and I, Lyra." The forest seemed to respond to their bond. Sunlight broke faintly through the mist, illuminating the clearing. The pulse beneath their feet softened, steady and calm, as if acknowledging the courage, the trust, and the awakening of power. But even as they stood together, a faint ripple in the shadows hinted at unfinished business. The curse had been tested, yes, but ancient magic is patient and the prophecy is not yet complete. Lyra's journey had only just begun, and she knew that greater trials awaited. Trials that would demand everything she had learned, and more. Kalen's gaze met hers again, and she saw in his eyes a reflection of her own determination and longing. The forest, the prophecy, and the shadowed past of the kingdom had brought them together. And now, standing side by side, they were ready to face whatever destiny had prepared. Lyra felt a surge of resolve, a quiet certainty that she had never known in all her years of exile. The forest had chosen her. The king had trusted her, and for the first time she trusted herself. Together they would awaken the prophecy. Together they would challenge the curse. Together they would forge a future not dictated by fear, rejection, or exile, but by courage, love, and the power that came from standing united. As the sun broke fully through the mist, the clearing bathed in golden light, Lyra took Kalen's hand and held it tight. The forest whispered around them, the ancient magic thrumming in harmony with their hearts. The prophecy had begun, the curse had been tested, And the bond between them was no longer fragile, it was unbreakable. And somewhere, deep within the forest, shadows stirred, watching, waiting, yet knowing that the awakening had begun, and that the Alpha King and the rejected Omega would face it together, as one. Lyra lifted her gaze to Kalen, and for the first time in her life she felt no fear. Only trust, only strength, and only the certainty that she had found her place, by his side, and in the forest that had always recognized her power. The future awaited, and for the first time, she was ready. Final cliffhanger, closure. Lyra has fully awakened her latent power, breaking the first chain of the ancient curse and fulfilling the beginning of the prophecy. The bond between her and Kalen is now undeniable, rooted in trust, shared trials, and mutual strength. Though shadows remain, they face the coming destiny together, united, courageous, and ready for whatever the forest, the curse, or fate itself will bring.